This time I'm building a Presider's chair for my pastor. It went from this to that. This chair is going into the chapel area of my church. And originally I thought he wanted the design for the Presider's chairs that are in the church, but he wanted it a little bit different. Didn't want any cushions on it. He wanted them resembling kind of what the altar server benches kind of look like too. So I drew that up and he liked it. He didn't want any angles on it whatsoever. He just wanted a 90-degree back. So right before I started working on rough cutting everything, one of my friends came over to just watch me start the process.
Welcome. That was such a nice camera.
That's solid.
It's just a workhorse, man.
Can I close this?
Gosh, and the colors on it, I freaking miss that camera.
Yeah. So here I am, just rough cutting part of the side assemblies.
Just feel this offcut. Just feel how heavy that is, man. Gosh, how dense that is. When Father told me that he wanted it solid, a part of me got really excited. I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be like
massive.
Yeah. It's gonna weigh a ton. But then I was like, crap, that's at least another $100 in oak.
They'll pay for it, right? Or no, you're gonna tie it to the chair.
Yeah, I'm tithing the whole thing. I just want to admire this camera because I just miss it. Miss how simple life used to be.
Yeah, you can go back.
I know. Awesome, that's what you want.
It was my first time working with white oak before, so I bought 8/4, and it was a lot of fun. Here I am on my 6-inch jet joiner. Got this at a garage sale for $70. Straight from the lumberyard, they weren't too bad. There was a little bit bowing in some of the pieces, but again, wasn't too bad.
Gotta show all the fans, you know. Gotta show them.
Since my pastor changed up the design that I originally thought he wanted, I actually had to go back to the lumberyard and grab a couple more 9-foot or 10-foot 8/4 boards. Originally, I bought just that one 8/4 board and then one 4/4 board. I ended up not using that 4/4 board at all, and so I'll probably just save it for another project.
What's happening?
Right after I unloaded that 8/4 white oak, I had a show to prepare for that my band was doing later that night, so as soon as I unloaded, I reloaded with drums. Once I set everything up over there at the venue, the show wasn't until that evening, so I just came back and kept up with the process of rough cutting and squaring up everything with the 2 new 8/4 boards that I had. And I used a variety of different ways to break them down. I was using my miter saw, but I don't have a full table set up, so some of them were just kind of sliding off. So I think I got a little bit smarter, started using my circular saw. It's a little bit safer. And this board, about a couple inches in, there was a lot of cracking already happening in that board. And so I decided to cut it off where it was. And I tried to leave everything as wide as possible so that I could, square them up and then start gluing them together. And then after that, cut it to final width and then final length afterwards too. So some of those boards were way too large for my jointer bed. And so I had to cut them down at least to just under 6 inches. So now it's about time we start thickness planing. Everything that you've seen so far is just edge joining, face joining, and then cleaning up another one true edge, and then all going in the planer. Right there is just a piece of 2x4 that I was using as a runner for my thickness planer. This is a rigid I just put new knives on it. It cuts super well. But to reduce on snipe, I send that runner in so it snipes the runner and not the white oak stock. I got super nervous about gluing the larger piece. Like on that whole side assembly, there's that one larger board than these three. And so I decided to just glue those three together first, have it cure and everything, and then afterwards I would put that longer board there. I don't really know why I did that. I'm just not really confident in my glue ups, and so I just did what felt comfortable to me. Took the clamps off, scraped off the rest of the glue, and then put some clamps back on. I do have a crosscut sled, but not one that was big enough to accommodate the width of these assemblies, and so I did what I could. Now I'm cutting it to final width here. Did have some burning going on when I was cross-cutting it, but it was kind of a pain to sand towards the end, but it worked out. And so there's a small little, piece of character at the bottom of the chair that matched the, I guess, altar server chairs. There's like a 3-inch rise, up from the bottom. I don't know, it just gave it a little bit of detail. My pastor wanted that in there as well. So I built this big box, and it's super convenient because it allows me to take a huge piece like this, clamp it to the box, and push the box instead of the workpiece. And so once I got comfortable with that and established my lines, I just worked slowly, carefully, and started cutting it out. And you'll see that later on in this video, I end up doing this in a couple different ways. I was using this table saw method, and it was okay. It worked fine. But the problem is that I hadn't glued on the large piece yet, and you see me cross-cutting those to length right now. And now I'm just now gluing it, so you'll see that I've got that just little decorative cut at the bottom, but it's not on the large piece because I'm an idiot. So I got to go back and do that. Now this is me cutting down some oak plywood, and actually it's an all MDF core. I think I had some miscommunication with the lumberyard where I grabbed this plywood. It ended up working, and by the time when we got out of my truck, I realized, like, oh my gosh, this is an MDF core. But I figured it would still be fine, so I cut it down to size, and I ended up just coming up with the idea to like double it up. So doubling up the seat and backrest assembly. So my thinking in just like doubling up the MDF core was that it wouldn't ever have any danger of sagging. I know my pastor wouldn't be sitting in the chair for very long or all the time, but still, and I don't think it was wide enough to be able to start sagging. I'm pretty sure it was just under 20.5 inches wide, but still, I much rather to just double it up. So I cut in a dado, which is about a 1/2 inch in, and just set it in and glued it up, left it overnight. And pretty much between the seat and the backrest, it was just about half a sheet of plywood. So now that that was all dried up, I decided to take my chamfer bit and put about a 1/4 inch chamfer all around. And I was super happy with that. But yeah, as you can see right here, that large piece definitely does not have that unique profile at the very bottom. Here's the way I cut it out. I decided to use my router this time instead of using that box, just to see how it went. And for the most part, it worked really, really well. It was just very, very time consuming. So I got it to a point to where, I didn't think I'd make it look any nicer using the router. And so I remember I still had my dado stack set up on my table saw. I know I don't have any insert for it, and it's probably really dangerous to do this, but that's what I got at the moment. And so I just used the dado stack to kind of clear out the rest of the waste. I didn't put any sacrificial fence up because I knew that I was going to put a small 1/8 chamfer at the very bottom, and I knew that would clear out the rest of that stock that I missed. Right after that, it was time to, kind of edge band, if you will, with more solid white oak, the areas where the MDF core would be exposed. So put it in clamps and then just trimmed it flush from there. Came back with a flush trim bit. It was about time to start sanding, and I started at 100, worked my way up to 220. I also used 400 in the finishing process. But other than that, while rough sanding was just 100 and all the way up to 220. Pulled out the non-variable speed one to kind of get rid of the dado marks and everything else. And it felt great. So now is like probably the trickiest part of the build, and so I just plunge routed that whole dado, that whole channel, and the seat is essentially just sandwiched in between the side assemblies. And so I used a number of just like bits to try to figure out which one would be easier to do. I chose to go with this 1/4 inch bit to start the process, and then I went to my 1/2 inch straight bit. And so I pretty much cleared out a majority of the waste, then I took a straight edge to establish my straight line. And then took a chisel to square off the corners. It actually fit. It was the same size, and I was super ecstatic. In order to make the other side go in a little better, I put about an 1/8 inch chamfer on the seat edges so it could slide in. And here's where I messed up a little bit. The fence that I was using was put on the other side assembly, and I didn't clamp that down to the table, so when my router pushed up against the fence that I made, it just kind of moved over and created a bad boo-boo. I was so mad.
It's heavy.
But that side's on the back side. You're never gonna see it. But I asked my pastor if he wanted me to fix it, and he was totally fine with it. He didn't care.
It's actually looking like something. Let's turn this off. Wow. Look at that. It actually looks like a chair. All right, let's do some measuring and see how square I am, or how not in square I am. It's looking good. Not perfect, but I'm really happy. Do you think it's too dangerous to try to sit on it right now? If I fall, it'll be great footage. Either way. All right, here we go. Just dados. Just no screws. Just one clamp is kind of holding it together. I think this is gonna work. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. Oh, so smooth. Oh.
So after that was good, just decided to glue it up, start that process. I'll let that glue dry overnight. that glue up was surprisingly uneventful because I did that dry fit. Then the next day, all I had to do was put that banding on the front facade of the seat. And so I just cross cut it to width, trimmed it a little, dry fit. There's no way for me to clamp it, so I just put another piece of plywood on top of it and then just stacked weights on it. Came back when it was dry, flushed it up, sanded. And then it was time to deliver pretty much. I wanted to get the finishing process done at my church, and when I got it to work, that meant that I could put a coat on, go up to my office, get some stuff done, and rinse and repeat. So I'm putting a little mineral spirits on it because I did a little bit more sanding when I got there. So the finish I'm using is Armor Seal, and I'm using the semi-gloss. And I think it came out really, really well. Overall, I put 3 coats on. So now it's time to transport it from the basement of our church to the chapel. The best way to do that was just to roll it instead of taking it through the inside of the building. So my pastor was just sitting in one of like the congregation chairs. You know, the altar's oak, the ambo's oak. The altar server benches are oak. The altar server table is oak. So I can understand their desire to have it match. If I could have done this differently, I would have wanted to buy all 3 of those 10-foot 8-quarter boards, you know, from the same tree. You know, but the reality was that I went one day, grabbed one 8-quarter board and then one 4-quarter board, thinking that's all I would need, but then the design changed. Had to go back, buy 2 different 8-quarter boards, and so that quarter sawn board right there looks absolutely beautiful. And it's contrasting heavily with that kind of cathedral-like grain. But what can you do? I'm happy with the turnout. The MDF oak ply, it came out really well. I didn't think it would turn out that well, but it actually did. Thanks for watching, guys. I learned a ton from making this. It was my first time actually working with this amount of hardwood. It was great. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know how I could have done better, actually. I need a coach. Peace, guys.